Sachas Kiddushin Daf Yud. We begin several lines into the daf at the two dots. The Gemara is discussing Kiddushin through Bia, primarily focusing on the question of whether that also accomplishes chuppah. Bia can accomplish a chuppah after Kiddushin or Shtar. The question is, Bia for Kiddushin, does it do Kiddushin and chuppah together? Meaning, is it Erisin and Nisuin together as one? So before that, the Gemara briefly has a question: which part of the bia actually creates the kiddushin? Is it the beginning of the bia or the end of the bia? We find many times in halacha different stages of the bia may have different halachic significance. So the Gemara wants to know: is the kiddushin chal at the beginning of the bia, which is what we call ha'ara, or is it at the end of the bia, what we call gemar bia? So the Gemara says the nafkamina would be if she's makabel kiddushin, well, let's say kesef kiddushin from somebody else, in between the hara, which is the beginning, and the gemar bia. So another nafkamina, the Gemara says, would be if a kohen gadol can do kiddushay bia, because the kohen gadol is only allowed to marry a basula, and she's no longer a basula from the beginning of the bia. If the kiddushin is only chal at the end of the bia, it would be forbidden for him to do that kiddushin, because by the time his kiddushin is chal, she's already not a basula. So the Gemara answers, the Rava says that anyone who does a bia, his intention is a gemar bia. When he says or he refers to the kiddushin that's happening with the bia, he's referring to the end of the bia, and therefore the end of the bia is kona and not the beginning of the bia. Next shayla the Gemara asks is, as we mentioned, if a bia can do nisuin and erisin in one. So the Gemara says an afkamina here would be all the halachos that a nesua has different than in arusa. For example, for a nesua, the husband, if he's a kohen, can be metame to her. Any husband could inherit his wife if she's a nesua to him, and he could also be made for her nedarim. However, if she's only an arusa, it does not have those halachos. So the Gemara says, first proof is from Abaye. Abaye brings a mission that says that a father has the following zechusim in his daughter from kiddushin, whether it's kesef, shtar, or bia. He has the right to her found objects, to her earnings, and to be made for her nedarim, and he can also receive the get for her. However, he does not eat any of the fruits of her property in her lifetime. Now, once she gets married, and it's the key line, once she gets married, the husband has additional, and there it says specifically nises, which is nisuin, the husband then receives these zechusim, plus he also gets the zechusim of the peiros of her property during her lifetime. So you see it says, first kiddushin with kesef, shtar, or bia, and then it talks about nises. So you see that nisuin happens after kiddushin bia, not as one. So Gemara says no, not necessarily. It could be that nises is referring to after kiddushin kesef or kiddushin shtar, but after kiddushin bia there is no separate step. The next proof the Gemara brings is Rava, who brings a brisa discussing the halachos of the minimum age at which bia counts as a bia for a woman. So the Gemara says it's at age 3. Earlier than that, it's just a wound. It's just something which heals. It's not considered to be a real bia. So therefore, all the technical halachos of bia apply from that age. And the brisa proceeds to list them off. And it also adds halacha about nasun, which is from where our proof will come. So the brisa says as follows: from that age, if she has a bias kiddushin, it counts as a bia, and therefore she's miskadeshes. If a yavam does it with her, he is kona her as a full marriage. If she's married, that is, her father was makabel kiddushin for her, and somebody else is bol her, he was just bol an eshes ish and has all those halachos. If she's a nida, anybody who's bol her becomes a boel hanida, which has all the halachos of a nida himself as far as tumah. That's anything he sits on, even many layers beneath him that he isn't touching or moving, or anything he lies on. In the same way, becomes tameh. If she's has nesuin to a kohen, and here the Gemara says that means that after this kiddushin she does chuppah with a kohen, then she eats truma. If anyone that is an erva, that is a forbidden bia with her, has bia with her, then that person gets misa for it. If it's one of the relationships which brings misa through the bia, of course she is pater because she's a katana. And if any puzzle has bia with her, that also apostles are from kahuna. So the Gemara's proof is, as we said, because we see that there is a chuppah which is discussed after bia, and assuming after this bia. So the Gemara says no, it's talking about where the chuppah, where the bia itself was l'shem nisuin to a kohen. That's when she can eat truma. It's not talking about an nisuin that happens later. The Gemara now begins its next raya, which is a bit of a lengthy raya, including a kal v'chemer. So the Gemara says that Yechanan ben Bagbag sent a message to Rabbi Yehuda ben Pseira in Nitziv, and he said, I heard that you say that in Arusa, a girl who only has Kiddushin, who is engaged, who is a daughter of a Yisrael and she is engaged to a Kohen, is allowed to eat Truma, meaning her Kiddushin to a Kohen gives her the right to eat Truma. So he was expressing surprise at that. So he sent him. In return, he says, don't you hold that way as well? I know that you know all types of Torah, so you surely know how to make a Kal V'chomer. And the way it arrived at that halacha is a very simple Kal V'chomer. And you compare Kesef and Bia in a Shifcha Kenanis. In a Shifcha Kenanis, Bia does not give her the right to eat Truma. If a Kohen is Boel her, then he doesn't give her the right to eat Truma. However, if he is Kona her with money, then that gives her the right to eat Truma, because every Shechel Kanas belonging to a Kohen eats Truma. So you see, Kesef is stronger than Bia as far as granting the rights to eat Truma. So now let's talk about a regular Bas Yisrael. I'm going to show you that Bia works, so Kesef for sure works. So he says in a Bas Yisrael that Bia gives her the right to eat Truma, Kesef certainly gives her the right to eat Truma. Now he just concludes by saying, what should I do? Because even though this is a logical reason to show that an Arusa through Kesef can eat Truma mid'oraisa, mid'rabanan, she's forbidden, as we've seen earlier in the Masechta. Now, the Gemara says, what do you mean? So you've proven to me that Kesef is stronger than Bia as far as giving the right to eat Truma, but where is it so clear to you that Bia can give the right to eat Truma, and Kesef, you're not clear? If you're making a Kal V'chomer, you want to learn Kesef out of Bia as far as giving the right to eat Truma. That means you have a situation where you don't know if Kesef can do it, but you do know that Bia can do it. What type of Bia are you talking about? Bia followed by a chuppah? If you're talking about Bia followed by a chuppah, then you got to be talking about Kesef followed by a chuppah. Kesef followed by a chuppah can give the right to eat Truma. That's a regular Nesuin. There's no argument about that. If you're talking about just Bia without followed by chuppah, so who told you that just Bia followed by chuppah gives the right to eat Truma any more than Kesef? Why is it obvious? Must be because we know that Bia, even without a chuppah, is already Nesuin, and Nesuin gives the right to eat Truma. So they have a clear proof. Bia itself is a Kiddushin and Nesuin together, and that's why you can learn from there that Kesef, which is a stronger power to Truma, must be able to do that as well, even without a chuppah. Someone says, no, that's not the pshat. We're not talking about a Bia that is not followed by a chuppah. We're talking about a Bia followed by a chuppah. I asked a question, Bia that's followed by a chuppah, how do you learn from there to a Kesef that's not followed by a chuppah? And a Kesef that is followed by a chuppah, we know already, we don't need that. Someone says, no, you could learn from there to a Bia which is not followed by a chuppah. And the reason is, you could learn from there to a Kesef which is not followed by chuppah. So again, we have Bia followed by chuppah, which brings the right to eat Truma. We could learn from there to Kesef which is not followed by chuppah. How so? Says the Gemara, we're going to go back to Shefach Kananis, and they were comparing a Kesef without chuppah to a Bia with chuppah. If a kohen is boil shefcha kananis and then he takes to a chuppah, there's no tfisa there. That has no value. A kohen cannot marry a shefcha kananis, and therefore she does not eat truma through that. Yet, Kesef, which means he purchases her, even without any chuppah, gives her the right to eat a truma. So you see, Kesef without chuppah is stronger than Bia with chuppah. So that's what we're discussing by irregular Isha. We're discussing a Kesef without chuppah compared to Bia with chuppah. Bia with chuppah gives her a right to eat truma, that's for sure, because it's a regular nisuin. And we're not talking about the Bia itself doing both. We're talking about a Bia followed by chuppah. And Kesef, even without a chuppah, should be stronger than that and should give her the right to eat truma, even without a following chuppah. That is the Gemara's proof, and on that he followed up and he said there is a Gzeira midrabanan because of Ula's takana. We're afraid that she's going to give her brother and her father, and that we don't allow her to eat truma until she becomes a real nesua. Now the Gemara explains what has been Bagbag's response. Why did he not like that Kal Chomer? So the Gemara says you can't look at Shefcha Kananis and compare Kesef purchasing an Ummah without chuppah and say that that's stronger than Bia with chuppah. You can't prove Kesef there to Kesef by a regular Isha. Kesef of purchasing an Ummah, it doesn't leave anything that's left to be done to complete the kinyan. Kesef purchasing an is a complete kinyan. Kesef Kiddushin is an incomplete kinyan. So you haven't proven from Amavriya that Kesef is stronger than Bia plus Chuppah in a case of regular Isha. There, the Kesef is an incomplete kinyan and it's not stronger than Bia plus Chuppah. Gemara now says Ravina has a whole different pshat in this exchange about an arusa eating truma. And Ravina says this cannot have been discussing deraisa. Deraisa, there's no discussion, there's no argument that an arusa could eat truma. The whole discussion is midrabanan. And it was about a different concern, midrabanan, that is the concern of what the Gemara calls simpon, that something may be found which apostles and cancels this transaction, either the purchase of the Amavriya or the Kiddushin to the woman. If we allow her to eat Truma, then she'll end up, and if the Kiddushin specifically ends up being canceled later, she'll have eaten Truma Shalei Kiddin. So the Rabbanan may have made Gzeira forbidding her to eat Truma until the marriage happens. When as soon actually happens, there's no possibility that there was a simpon anymore because he checks it out fully before he does Nisun. So the Gemara now explains how the exchange works according to this pshat. So the Gemara says that he sent him, I heard that you say that Nerusa Bas Yisrael is allowed to eat Truma if she's engaged to a Kayin, if she has Kiddushin to a Kayin. So why are you not afraid of simpon? Maybe there's a psul. So he said back, don't you hold that as well? I know that you know all the rooms of Torah, you certainly know how to make a kal v'chaymer. So look at Shifcha Kananis. Bia of Shifcha Kananis does not let her eat Truma. Purchase with Kesef allows her to eat Truma, and we don't say maybe there's a simpon, and therefore she shouldn't be allowed to. So here, in the case of a regular woman, that her Bia allows her to eat Truma, certainly Kesef Kiddushin should allow her to eat Truma, and we should not be concerned for a simpon. And what could I do? That even though this is a good pshat, however, the Chachamim said he can't anyway because of a different concern, and that is the concern of giving to her brother or father to eat Truma while she is living in their house. Now, Ben Bagbag replies, and his answer is that there's no concern of simpon by an Eved, that you're gonna find something later that passes the transaction. What are you gonna find exactly? If there's an injury, a mum or something, so if it's visible, he saw it, and if he decided to go through with it anyway, he has no claim. If it's hidden, so it makes no difference. It stays under his or her clothing. What's the problem? You don't have to see it. He's hiring him to work. As long as he or she can work, it's fine. No, you'll say maybe no. You found him to be a thief or a kidnapper. So the halacha is, you buy an Eved and it turns out that he's a thief or a kidnapper, it's too bad. You can't claim that the sale is voided because you should have known that, and you probably knew that, and you buy it with that risk in mind. The only thing you could have is that it turns out that he's a highway robber, a bandit, an armed robber, or that he has the death sentence from the kingdom on his neck. Now, those two things everybody knows about. People, that's a famous thing. People are aware of that. So therefore, there's no claim of simpon. So the Gemara asks an obvious question. The Gemara says both Ben Bagbag and Rabbi Yehuda ben Seira are both agreeing that she can't eat Truma until she's in Nesua. They're saying different reasons, but what's the difference? One is saying it's because we're afraid of simpon, and one saying it's because we're afraid that she's going to give her brother or her father. So why they're arguing about it, it's the same thing. Some answers, there's three nafkaminas. One nafkamina is if he was makabel upon himself that he's not going to have any simpon claim, so then that's not an issue, but the other one is. Another one is if the father gave her over to the messengers of the husband, or the messengers of the husband went with her to bring it to the father. She's already out of the home of the father and the brother, then there's no concern of Ula.